You have been standing in a kind of holy suspension, and you have felt it even in ordinary places, like the kitchen, the car, and the edge of your bed. What looked like delay has been gathering meaning, and what looked like silence has been carrying a message that your heart has already started to hear. You have not been forgotten, you have been held. You noticed it in small moments before anyone else could name it, like the way your breathing changed when you opened your phone, or the way the room felt after everyone else had gone quiet. The same chair, the same hallway, the same window at night can suddenly feel heavier when your spirit knows something is moving. Your shoulders may have been carrying that weight for longer than you realized, and your hands may have been restless without a clear reason. That restlessness is not confusion only. It is often the body learning that an old season is no longer speaking the truth. You were not made to remain trapped inside a story that ended before you knew it. There is a turning already in motion. Even now, you may be listening while the house is still asleep, while the street outside is still dark, while the first light has not yet touched the curtains. That is how many beginnings arrive, quietly, without applause, without explanation, and without asking permission from the old order. Your chest may tighten when you think about what is next, because transition always asks something from the body before it gives anything back. Yet the tightening does not mean danger every time. Sometimes it means readiness, meeting its first real test. The faithful life does not always arrive with comfort first. Sometimes it arrives with a summons, and you are hearing one. You have likely tried to name this season with ordinary words, but ordinary words have not been enough. You have called it waiting, but the waiting has felt too active for that. You have called it uncertainty, but your spirit has been too alert for simple confusion. The pattern is closer to the moment when a door is still closed, but the sound of movement is already coming from the other side. There is a biblical echo here, like the long night before a crossing, when people had to stay ready before the path could be seen. The lesson was never that darkness was forever. The lesson was that readiness. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Darkness can live inside darkness, and that is where you have been learning. The pressure you felt was not only pressure, it was also preparation pressing against the edges of your old life. You may have noticed that certain conversations no longer fit, certain habits no longer satisfy, and certain distractions no longer have their old power. That is not emptiness, that is separation. What once held your attention can no longer hold your future, and the tension you feel is the space between those two realities. You were trained by survival to stay where things were familiar, even if familiar was small. But something stronger than familiarity has begun to call your name. You are being pulled toward what is true. There were moments when you almost talked yourself out of what you sensed. You looked at the same walls, the same responsibilities, the same bills, the same unfinished tasks, and you told yourself nothing was changing. But your spirit did not agree with your explanation. It is possible to live in a room that looks unchanged and still be standing inside a new season. The old way said, wait until everything is proven. The new way says, pay attention because the proof is already arriving in fragments. A certain peace, a certain discomfort, a certain reluctance to keep pretending all point in the same direction. Not everything delayed is denied. Some things are simply being arranged. You have carried a private fatigue that other people do not always see. It shows up when you sit in the car before going inside, when you pause with one hand on the door, when you stare at the ceiling and feel more awake than rested. The body knows when it has been living under unfinished expectation. Your neck holds it, your jaw holds it, your sleep holds it, and even your silence holds it. There is a difference between being tired from work and being tired from carrying a season that has not spoken clearly yet. This is why you cannot keep interpreting every heaviness as failure. Some heaviness is simply the weight of transition, and transition always asks for honesty. What has been happening in you may not be loud, but it is not small. It has been happening in the way you look twice at certain signs, in the way a sentence lands deeper than expected, in the way your heart slows down when truth is near. That is why the old noise around you is losing power. It cannot fully rule a person who has begun to notice the difference between pressure and calling. If you keep feeding the old interpretation, you stay in the room with what is ending. If you receive the new interpretation, you begin to stand where grace has already moved ahead of you. The shift is real. The only question is whether you will let it speak. There is a part of you that has wanted certainty before obedience, but life rarely gives that order. You often have to step while the path is still forming under your feet. Think of the last time you locked the door, checked your phone, and stood still for just a second before leaving, as if your body understood that something important was about to happen. That stillness is often where the heart catches up to the invitation. The old life keeps saying, stay where you can explain everything. The new life keeps saying, move where you can trust more than explanation. You are closer than you think. The evidence is already in your posture. If any of that landed in you, type 888 in the comments. It is a small sign of overflow and a simple way to name that you recognize the moment you are in. Type 888, then come back to me. What you are doing in that small act is not random. You are marking agreement before the change finishes unfolding. And if that felt quiet but true, keep listening, because the shape of this journey is becoming clearer now. The signs have not been arriving all at once. They have been arriving the way light enters a room before sunrise, first at the edge, then across the floor, then finally where you can no longer pretend not to see it. You may have felt that in the way one conversation kept returning to your mind, or in the way one burden became impossible to ignore. The Spirit often speaks like that, through repetition that is not noise but mercy. Your life does not need another empty alarm. It needs recognition. And recognition is beginning to settle where denial used to live. You may have noticed that your inner world has become less tolerant of what drains you. The endless scrolling, the borrowed opinions, the emotional clutter, the habits that once filled the silence now feel thinner. That does not make you strange. It makes you awake. When a season is closing, even ordinary things start to feel like they have lost their authority. Your body knows it before your mind admits it. Your breath shortens around what is false, and your shoulders ease around what is true. That is one of the clearest signals that a turn is happening. The turning does not always feel majestic at first. Sometimes it feels like grief for what used to fit, even when what used to fit was too tight. You may still love the old version of safety because it kept you company when you did not know what was coming. But love for the old does not cancel the call of the new. There is a deeper mercy in being released than in being entertained by delay. What is ending is not your value. It is your confinement, and what is beginning may ask for courage before it offers clarity. There is something sacred about the moments when you are alone and nobody can distract you from the truth. In the quiet of a late evening with a lamp on, a cup left half finished and the house finally still, you can feel it. Your spirit no longer wants the same ceiling. That feeling can be uncomfortable because ceilings are familiar even when they are low. But there is no blessing in staying where your soul has outgrown the room. The pressure you feel is not there to crush you. It is there to reveal that the walls were never meant to last forever. What feels like pressure may be the first sign of an exit. You have probably wondered why certain doors stayed shut for so long. The answer is not always rejection. Sometimes a closed door is protection from a room that would have delayed your growth even more. You may not have seen it then, but the delay may have kept you from settling too early into a version of life that could not carry you. This is where discernment matters more than impatience. A closed path can be an act of mercy when your understanding is still too small to see the destination. And the mercy in that feels different after the fact. It feels like wisdom wearing patience. At some point, you began to realize that your spirit was speaking louder than your schedule. You kept moving through tasks, through messages, through routines, yet something inside kept insisting that the old pace could not continue. That insistence is not rebellion, it is alignment. The deeper life in you knows when something is no longer supporting your assignment. You may have felt it as unease, but it is more truthful to call it preparation. What is being prepared in you cannot stay hidden forever. It has to surface, it has to breathe, it has to be named. There are nights when you lie down and feel the day still sitting in your chest. The mind may try to sort everything out, but the body remembers first. It remembers the sentence you did not say, the tears you did not release, the worry you kept folded neatly inside. That hidden weight can make you think you are behind, when in truth you are being refined. Refinement does not always feel gentle while it is happening, but it always changes what can remain. What cannot survive the fire was never meant to define you, and what survives may be quieter, but it is stronger. The path before you is not asking for performance, it is asking for attention. There is a difference between trying to force a future and learning how to recognize one. Your life has spent enough time under pressure from outside voices that now it needs room to listen from within. Sometimes the clearest guidance comes after the loudest noise has passed. In the same way, you can hear a distant train only after the traffic outside your window fades. That is why stillness matters. Stillness is not absence. It is the place where the next instruction can finally be heard. You may have been tempted to think that the wait meant nothing was happening, but in sacred timing, waiting is often where the deepest work occurs. While you were learning to endure the delay, something else was being prepared that you could not manage by force. The old interpretation said, if it is not immediate, it is not real. The new interpretation says, if it is hidden, it may still be forming. That change in perspective alters everything. It changes how you breathe, how you choose, and how you stop demanding instant proof from a process that has its own wisdom. Your life has not been random in these last stretches of silence. Even the moments when you sat in traffic, stared at a blinking cursor, or stood in the shower with your thoughts echoing off the tile were part of a larger conversation. The ordinary setting made room for the extraordinary question, will you trust what is being revealed before it looks complete? That question reaches into the place where fear and faith wrestle quietly. Fear wants immediate control. Faith learns to stand with open hands, and you have been standing at that threshold more often than you knew. There is a way the body responds when truth is near. The shoulders drop a little, the jaw unclenches, the eyes soften even if tears are close. You may have felt that while hearing words you did not expect to matter so much. That softness is not weakness, it is recognition. Something inside you knows when it is no longer fighting for survival and is being invited into something steadier. The shift is subtle, but it is real. It is the kind of real that changes the next decision before the decision is visible. This is why the metaphor of a door matters so deeply here. Not because doors are dramatic, but because they mark the difference between what has been and what can be entered. You have stood before enough closed doors to know the sting of being kept waiting. Yet a door is also a mercy, because it means there is an inside and there is an outside, and crossing between them is possible. The long night has not been wasted if it has taught you how to listen for hinges. You are not imagining movement, you are hearing it. There may still be a part of you that wants the whole picture before you move. That part is understandable. It has protected you before. But protection can become limitation when it refuses to trust the next step. You do not need the whole staircase to take the first step, and you do not need every answer to recognize that the atmosphere has changed. The old season asked you to survive what was familiar. This one asks you to trust what is forming. That is a different kind of strength, and it begins with surrender. If the image I have been walking with you through has settled in a place you cannot easily explain, typistoi ready. Wait, that is not in your language. You have been carrying the image of the door for long enough now that it has started to shape your expectation. The handle, the threshold, the light that leaks through the crack, all of it speaks of movement before the full opening arrives. There are moments when you can feel the change without being able to name every detail, and that is how the deeper work begins. The old room still exists, but it no longer defines the horizon. The passage is already in motion, and the heart that notices it is the heart that has begun to cooperate with it. The middle of a long waiting season is often where clarity starts to sharpen. You stop asking only why it took so long, and you begin asking what was being protected by the delay. That question changes your posture. It takes you out of resentment and into discernment. You begin to understand that some closures were not punishments at all, but mercy in disguise. And when that lands, even the memory of disappointment starts to lose its power to narrate your future. The story is larger than the ache that introduced it. There is a pressure in the chest when truth has been avoided for too long. You feel it when you know a pattern must end, when an old agreement can no longer stand, when a familiar excuse no longer sounds convincing even to you. That pressure can make you restless at night and quiet in the day. It can also become the beginning of freedom. Freedom rarely arrives as a shout. More often, it begins as an honest refusal to keep calling a closed thing open. That is the moment when the threshold starts to matter more than the room behind you. I want you to write these words in the comments. Eu vejo isso. Let that phrase be your acknowledgement that you recognize the turning when it speaks to you. It is not a performance, it is a witness. Type Eu vejo isso, then come back to me, because what you see now is part of what will steady you later. The threshold does not become less real because you name it. It becomes more real. And what is named with honesty can be met with courage. You may feel that naming it is small, but small acts become anchors when the water is moving. A hand on a doorknob can be the beginning of an entirely different morning. A whispered yes in the middle of uncertainty can carry more weight than many loud declarations made too early. That is why the sentence matters. It places you inside the moment instead of outside it. It keeps you from drifting back into the fog of denial. And once your heart has seen what it has seen, it is harder to pretend the old walls are the whole world. There is a kind of holy tiredness that comes after long vigilance. You have watched, waited, wondered, and held yourself together through more than people realize. That kind of endurance leaves marks in the body. It shows up in the shoulders, in the forehead, in the way your breath takes a little longer to deepen. But the tiredness does not mean the process failed. It means you have been standing at the edge long enough to feel the weather change. The edge is not punishment. It is the place where decisions become visible. What you have been sensing is not accidental, and it is not imaginary. The signs have been too consistent, the inner resistance too specific, the return of old truths too persistent to dismiss. Something in you has already said yes, even if your mouth has not yet caught up. That is why the next step matters, not because you must force the future, but because you must refuse to stay where the future cannot reach you. The door is not asking you to understand it perfectly. It is asking you to come near. When a path begins to open, it often exposes the places where you had learned to shrink. You see the habits of self-protection more clearly, the ways you made yourself smaller to avoid disappointment, the moments you accepted less because less felt safer. That seeing can sting, it can also heal. The sting is proof that a truer measure exists now. You are no longer bound to the smallest version of your own expectation. Something larger is being invited in, and it will not fit through the old fear without changing you. If this message has confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your amen without words, not as a metric, as an agreement that the door is not an accident and that your heart is not overreacting. The gesture itself becomes a quiet seal on what has been recognized. Keep listening after that, because agreement is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of movement. And movement always reveals what was only understood in part. The agreement becomes clearer when you notice how your inner life responds to simple truth. You do not need a storm to know the weather has changed. Sometimes a single sentence is enough to reorient everything. You hear it and your shoulders settle, or you hear it and your resistance rises because the truth is close to something you have avoided. Both responses matter. Both tell you that the moment has weight. What is real does not always feel easy, but it does feel distinct. That distinction is part of discernment. Someone has come to mind while these words are reaching you. Someone who has been carrying a quiet strain behind a composed face. Perhaps that person has been working hard and smiling through fatigue, or perhaps they have been praying in silence while pretending everything is manageable. If that face appeared in your mind, send this to them, not as a performance, as delivery. Some messages are meant to arrive like bread at the right table, not like noise in a crowded room. What lands here may be meant to reach them there. There is a tenderness in realizing that what helped you may also help someone else. That is not coincidence. It is care spreading by appointment. The same truth that steadied your breathing may steady another person's. The same recognition that helped you stop fighting the door may help them stop fighting the season. Sharing in that way is not marketing, it is mercy. It is one person saying to another, I saw the light and I thought of you. That is how hope often travels when it is most believable. Before this closes, type I am chosen in the comments. Let it stand as an identity declaration, not as a wish, but as confirmation that you are receiving what has been spoken to you. Type it slowly and let your hands do what your spirit has already begun to understand. Come back to me after that, because identity changes how you walk through the threshold. What was once only pressure becomes direction. What was once only waiting becomes readiness. You may not feel fully ready in the way you imagined readiness would feel. That is normal. Readiness in sacred things often looks less like certainty and more like willingness. It looks like a person who knows the old room is finished, even if the next room is still dim. It looks like someone who can breathe through the uncertainty without surrendering the truth they have received. That is where your strength has been quietly growing, not in noise, in consent, not in force, in trust. The final shift is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to stop betraying the person you have already become. You have outgrown the old explanation, the old fear, and the old agreement with delay as your identity. The door has been speaking in the language of mercy, and your spirit has been learning to answer. You do not need to manufacture the next season. You only need to meet it honestly. The step across the threshold is not a leap into chaos. It is a step into alignment. What waits on the other side may not look exactly like what you expected, but it will carry the mark of truth. That is often how faithful openings work. They do not flatter every expectation. They fulfill what has been deepest and most real. If the path feels narrow, it may be because it is precise. If it feels quiet, it may be because noise has been removed so that you can hear clearly again. The point is not spectacle, the point is arrival, and arrival begins long before the feet move. Stay with the voice that has been steadying you through this. Stay with the breathing that is becoming deeper. Stay with the courage that does not need to be loud to be real. You are not being pushed into emptiness. You are being led into a room that can finally hold the truth of your life. The old delay has done its work, and now it is yielding. The threshold is no longer only something you stood before. It is something you are ready to cross. May peace settle on your shoulders, and clarity rest in your chest as you move from waiting into recognition. May what was held back for your good now be returned in the right way and at the right time. You are not late, and you are not lost, and the holy timing over your life is still unfolding with care. You were never abandoned in the delay, only prepared by it. You were never forgotten at the door, only taught how to listen for the opening. Stay gentle, stay awake, stay honest. The same hand that guarded you in the waiting is guiding you now in the crossing. You are being gathered, you are being strengthened. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.